They've stood at the front lines of law, leadership, and public service. Attorney Karen Jimeno, sharp, steady, a lawyer, and educator, turns complex issues into clear insight. Attorney Mike Toledo, seasoned, fearless, a strategist and communicator whose voice has shaped public understanding of law and governance. Together, they make the law accessible, connecting principles with real-life questions, confronting the issues that define our nation. This is Abogado.
Good evening and welcome to Abogado, where we examine the laws that hold power accountable and the limits of that accountability when the highest office is involved. I'm Attorney Mike Toledo.
And I'm Attorney Karen Jimeno. Tonight, a discussion on what the Constitution asks of the Presidency and what the public is entitled to see in return. Let's take a closer look.
In a democracy, power is borrowed, never owned, and those who hold the highest office answer to the people who place them there. But how much must the president reveal? The state of their health, the extent of their wealth, the records of their decisions? Some say the public's right to know is absolute. Without it, power escapes accountability. Others say even presidents deserve privacy, and disclosure can be weaponized or risk security. Between the Constitution's promise and the palace's discretion, we confront a question that defines the republic itself: transparency and the presidency. What does the public have a right to know?
Joining us tonight is Attorney Dino de Leon, partner at De Leon, Arevalo, Gonzales law offices, widely known by its shorthand, DARGON Law. In 2020, he filed the first petition in our history to compel disclosure of a sitting president's health records.
Also joining us tonight is Attorney Domingo Cayosa, former National President of the Integrated Bar of the Philippines and one of the country's most frequently consulted voices on constitutional law. He has written and spoken extensively on impeachment, constitutional processes, and the architecture of public accountability. Mga panyero, attorneys, good evening and welcome. Welcome to Abogado.
Good morning. Good evening na ba? Good evening.
Good evening.
Mike and Karen. And syempre, nice to be back.
Yeah.
Good evening, Karen and Mike and Attorney Dino. Good evening to our viewers.
Before we dive in, let's take a quick look at how tonight's program is structured.
We begin with the opening statements. Each guest delivers a focused 2-minute statement, laying out their perspective on the proposition. The conversation then unfolds through 2 key subtopics. For each subtopic, the guests take turns presenting their insights in 2-minute segments. Even if they share the same stand, they are encouraged to highlight different angles, supporting arguments, or real-world applications. After both have spoken, we move into the open exchange, a 6-minute free-flowing discussion where the guests engage each other directly, ask questions, and expand on their points. Once both subtopics have been explored, we proceed to closing reflections, where each guest is given 2 minutes to summarize their key messages. Finally, the hosts step in with their own questions in this 6-minute segment. The guests respond, clarify, and deepen the discussion, ensuring critical issues are surfaced, even if the guests are aligned in position.
And now we begin with opening perspectives. In the last several months, the question of presidential transparency has returned to the public debate. Attorney De Leon, from your perspective and from your experience litigating this very provision, what does the Constitution demand of the presidency? And what does it wisely leave to the discretion of the office? You have 2 minutes.
Of course, thank you. As a general rule, the Constitution guarantees the right of information. This is reflected in Article 3 as part of the Bill of Rights. And then, of course, we have to understand that as a general rule, we can only have accountability if there is transparency. So, as a general rule, dapat merong transparency even in the office of the President. And, of course, when it comes to health, no, sa health records, this was my personal experience when I filed this. If you would recall, during that time, we listened to Rodrigo Duterte at the wee hours of the night,
Yes.
and his press conferences to me, at least as how I described it, were akin to a drunken monologue. Hindi mo maintindihan. Madaling araw, hindi mo alam kung lalabas. And then, of course, there's reasonable basis to see that he was unwell. We can't understand what he was saying. It was close to gibberish. If you would recall the famous "the kit is the kit is the kit," which was translated to a lot of memes online, no? And of course, as the public, we were concerned because at that time we were afraid of our safety and whether or not the humanity will survive this virus, no, this pandemic. So when we filed that petition, or I filed that petition, unfortunately, it was rejected by the Supreme Court even without asking for a comment, no, from the Solicitor General, despite the fact na merong nakalagay doon na several pieces of evidence. Ano yung mga pieces of evidence na yun? The President admitted that he has myasthenia gravis. The President admitted that he has spinal issues. So nanggaling sa Presidente mismo, no, the President said he has GERD. A court in Pasig categorically stated that he was suffering from antisocial personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder. And based on journals from Harvard and Mayo Clinic that I quoted, ito may complicate his medication. No? So those were reasonable pieces of evidence. But unfortunately, the Supreme Court said it wasn't enough. So for me, because of that Supreme Court ruling, it makes it very difficult for any citizen to now invoke that constitutional guarantee. And to me, if there is any doubt, you err on the side of transparency.
Partner, before we ask Atty. Cayosa to respond as well, just very quickly, because you raised that point that when you did file this petition in the Supreme Court regarding former President Duterte's health, the Supreme Court did not even ask them to comment, right?
Correct.
But
I was going to ask the same thing.
Now it's they have a case filed by former Speaker Pantaleon Alvarez, and the Supreme Court asked them to comment.
Yeah, but I was going to ask, what was the basis? On what grounds was the petition dismissed?
Well, ang sabi is based lang daw sa quoted journals sa Mayo Clinic, sa Harvard, and then based lang daw sa articles online because of the own admissions of the President. And I corrected that. In fact, I submitted a response to that and I said, no, these are not just based on online articles. These are based on official records of the President, Office of the President. Because every time, di ba, na merong press conference ng Pilipinas, ng Presidente ng Pilipinas, meron yan eh. Kino-quote ko sa kanila yung provision, yung buong paragraph. Naintindihan nyo kung ano nakasulat yan? Walang naintindihan. No one. Because pinatranscribe ko pa lahat yung mga press conference. Tapos yung pair ko pa dun sa official records. Eh, no? So sabi, hindi pa raw enough yun. So, of course, I disagree vehemently.
Okay.
No?
So this is going to be a very interesting discussion.
Yes,
And I think, picking up from what Attorney De Leon said, it's not necessarily a precedent na hindi na ma-file or ma-question because, as you said, this time, the
Supreme
respondent
Court
has been asked to comment, right?
Yeah.
Thank you, Attorney Dino. Attorney Cayosa, from the constitutional law perspective, how should we understand the balance that the 1987 Constitution itself strikes between the public's right to information on one hand and privacy, security, and executive privilege on the other?
Well, when we discuss issues like this, constitutional issues, it's always a dynamic play of the rights and the duties and the obligations, the privileges, and the principles of the Constitution and the law. So, positive law, the word of the Constitution and the specific laws, and the overarching principles in constitutional law. So, it's always balancing. It changes every now and then. It's dynamic. And I'm very glad that Attorney Dino, a young lawyer at that time, was courageous enough to bring his case to the Supreme Court. And that was not too far ago. Iba ang treatment ng Supreme Court dun sa kanya and right now. So you see that, things change. In hindsight, perhaps many institutions and personalities were scared shit during that time. But now, I suppose, the fear is not there, or perhaps they realize we can look at these things differently this time. So let's see how the Supreme Court will handle this.
Hence, which is probably why this time they've asked the respondent to comment on the petition.
Exactly.
When we return, we examine the most intimate of presidential disclosures, the state of the president's health. Is it a constitutional duty owed to the Republic or a private matter the Constitution wisely leaves to the president and his physician? You're watching Abogado.
Not everything trending is truth.
No. Don't want to be fake news peddler here. No.
And not every opinion asked for.
Agree or disagree? We said what we said.
Welcome to the side of conversation people don't always agree with,
Oh, that's not an unpopular opinion.
so but need to hear.
Okay, got it. Now I know.
Unfiltered, unpopular opinion. Starting May 4, weekdays at 5, only here on Billionario News Channel.
Stay informed when it matters most, from breaking stories and other developments that shape your day. Midday Report delivers clear, concise, and credible news right when you need it.
Join Mai Rodriguez as she brings you the headlines, insights, and updates that keep you ahead.
Monday to Friday, 1 p.m., only here on BNC.
Welcome back. You're still watching Abogado. Tonight's question: what does the public have a right to know about the presidency? With us again are Attorney Dino de Leon and Attorney Domingo Cayosa.
Now, Article 7, Section 12 of the Constitution requires disclosure in case of serious illness. In 2020, a petition to enforce it was dismissed. And as we mentioned earlier, without even asking the respondent to comment, with the court trusting presidential discretion, although 2 justices dissented. Now, Attorney Dino, as both petitioner and practitioner, what is the strongest case for enforceable disclosure and the best argument against it?
Well, the best argument for it first, no? Kasi syempre, very important yung disclosure. When you become president, you have to remember that you have given a certain amount of your privacy already. That is a fact because you are both the chief executive and the commander-in-chief. And every single time that you are unwell, it has to be standard practice that should be disclosed so that the nation will know what to do. And in fact, there are constitutional provisions that will ensure proper succession or even temporary disability of the president. And nakalagay sa constitutional deliberation because, during that time, pandemic eh. Sabi nga sa akin ni si Salvador Padelo, ang daming oras ng abogado na to. Pandemic eh. So talagang ang ginawa natin dito, re-research natin yung constitutional deliberations. No? And ang nakalagay sa constitutional deliberation, ibasahin ko lang, ang ibig sabihin ng serious illness, based on the discussions of the framers of the Constitution, ito yung sabi nila, Commissioner Ople, no? One that almost, but not quite, incapacitates the president for that period of serious illness. Almost, but not quite. And the second one, the description of serious illness is one where he is not really incapacitated, but seriously inconvenienced in the conduct of his urgent duties as president. No? So, kung seriously inconvenienced ka lang, kahit na hindi ka incapacitated, the constitutional command is for you to disclose. No? Unfortunately, during that time, malino naman na hindi mo alam nga kung gabi, ilang instances na namin dinocument and nag-file pa kami ng urgent motion to resolve yung biglang nawawala siya sa international conferences, conventions, no? Yung hindi magka-cancel bigla at the last minute, no? All of those things are documented. And kitang-kita, because of his old age as well, na ina-admit naman ng administration, he is definitely seriously inconvenienced. And it's not too much to us to check, kamusta ka ba? Hindi naman ibig sabihin tatanggalin ka eh. But the public has the right to know that so that they would know what action they will take. As a public, di ba? They will ask for, will they ask for replacement? Will they ask for a temporary caretaker? Will they ask for further accountability? We are not certain. But ultimately, the Constitution trusts the public with that kind of decision making, but they should know first through the disclosure of the status of the health records.
Okay. At marami talagang oras sila, Attorney De Leon, kasi they were tracking how many times yung nawala and ano, you included that in your
included.
information.
At saka tinatranscribe namin, we listen painfully every night sa lahat ng mga 1 hour, 2 hour monologues na hindi mo maintindihan. And talagang tinatranscribe ng team ko yan.
So talagang maraming oras. Thank you, Attorney De Leon. Attorney Cayosa, the Constitution uses the word shall, but the Supreme Court has read that word as leaving room for presidential judgment. Is that reading the correct one? And if public conduct, like lifting weights, is offered in lieu of a formal bulletin and running in laps, is that faithful to the spirit of Section 12 of the Constitution or a departure from it?
Well, I agree that every citizen would want to know how the president and high government officials are doing, especially the commander-in-chief. So that's a given. But unfortunately, the Constitution is the word. And it says, it's correct, it's shall, but if you look at the whole provision, that duty kicks in if, as Mike says, the illness is serious and it impairs the president from discharging his functions as president. So, and that, who knows most about that? Of course, the president. So, the Supreme Court perhaps was just more careful. They didn't want to cross the boundary of the judiciary commanding the president because to maintain the balance of power. But bulletins from the doctor, official doctor of the president, should do the trick. Should be more expedient, rather than pitting the Supreme Court, the judiciary against the executive. So that merong kasagutan, may remedy yung taong bayan na gusto malaman kumusta ba ang ating presidente.
And I just remembered jumping jacks pala yun. Jumping jacks and carrying sacks of rice. So now let's open this to a discussion. We have 6 minutes. And who wants to start? Ako naalala ko lang, partner. This is really very relevant kasi hindi lang dito sa Pilipinas yung nagka-demand for the president to disclose their public health, state of their health publicly. That includes nung time ni President Biden of the United States. The public was also demanding, what is the state of his health? Kasi meron na siyang mga naging speeches that people found to be incoherent. May mga times din na nadulas siya, as in physically nadulas. And then now, with President Trump, we're hearing that demand again from the public.
Exactly.
So, nag-share na po si Attorney Dino nung constitutional deliberations, no? But what is the intent here of the framers? If we hear from Attorney Cayosa naman.
Valid yung interest, the people's interest to know how the president is doing. So the Constitution provides not just one, but a number of ways by which that can be addressed. Number one, of course, is to try to get the Supreme Court to compel him to disclose to the public how is he doing. And Attorney Dino did his best. Unfortunately, what he got were 2 dissenting opinions, but they dismissed his petition. But that was a good start. But let us recall that in case really the president doesn't want and he's incapacitated, there's another remedy. The majority of his cabinet members can actually inform Congress that he is incapacitated. So we leave it again to officials, high officials of government, to act on it. But for us, because the interest of transparency, accountability, and the health of the president is really even beyond the Constitution. It's a practical political interest. And that's why I suppose the better thing to do is for the president to just volunteer this without anybody asking for it. There's nothing. The sitting president will not lose anything by showing the public, I'm well, and this is the status of
Lalo
my
na
health.
kung healthy naman pala
Correct,
tayo.
correct. Now, I'll throw this question to both of you. Let's say, there are people who say that the right to privacy is paramount. No? And it is also enshrined and protected by the Constitution. And there are institutional ways of actually informing the public of the state of the President's health. Mayroon namang institutional ways pero may mga argumento na sinasabi nga nila, since there is no really clear express mandate provided for in the Constitution that would compel and require the President to reveal the state of his health, ergo, he should not be compelled. But he can, of course, voluntarily submit himself, or he can, of course, as mentioned by Atty. Cayoso, come up with bulletins. No? So, sa argumento na gano'n, hindi naman provided sa Constitution. Well, you did mention, of course, when you become president, you're president for 24 hours, 24/7 yan. You don't become president when you're already in your, not a president when you're already in your room. You're still president 24/7. Pero, yun nga, how do you now reconcile these two conflicting views?
Well, yung sa right to privacy, ang stand namin nung sinulat ko yung petition is the President has given a certain amount of his right to privacy the moment that he assumed office. No? Kaya nga alam dapat natin kung nasaan siya, alam dapat natin kung anong ginagawa niya, what should be his stance on issues, including which is explicitly stated in the Constitution, when there is serious illness. In other words, actually, pag serious yung illness, or serious yung condition, the President does not have the leeway or the discretion not to disclose. No? What if hindi siya sigurado? Ano kasi yung mga instances dito? Hindi serious yung illness. Para sa akin, disclose anyway because the public has the right to know, not based on that provision, but on the constitutional guarantee on freedom of information so that the public knows what to prepare. And at the very least, it is of public knowledge. So kung hindi serious, I think she should still disclose. But I agree with you, pag hindi serious, walang constitutional provision requiring. If it's serious, then the President has to disclose. If he is not certain, or his medical team is not certain, or there's some sort of ambiguity, for me, you err on the side of disclosure because the purpose of that constitutional provision is actually for disclosure. No? And then, what's the worst that can happen? No? The worst that can happen is, hindi ka pala fit based on the public Hindi dapat hindi ka magserbisyo. Diba? But in those instances na hindi tayo sigurado, you leave it up for the public to decide. At least that is my stand in terms of the decision-making calculus.
Yeah.
Okay,
And what is serious? Ano ang standard for serious? Just because hindi pa ito na-decide ng Supreme Court,
Hindi
no?
pa what exactly is serious
diba?
illness?
Minsan tumataas yung blood pressure ng tao.
Yung alam
That's
lang
why-
natin yung constitutional deliberation, which is if he's seriously inconvenienced. That is enough.
Inconvenience.
That is enough. Yun yung nakalagay.
So it can be a mental health issue as well.
Yes, I am quoting directly from the constitutional provisions. Of course, as we know, as lawyers, it's just yung deliberations is just
To help
our
in
guide.
interpretation.
Oo,
To
our
help in
guide.
interpretation.
And in fact, in certain instances, the Supreme Court reversed that.
Pero partner, ito, no, Atty. Cayoso, no, and of course you can weigh in. What if, let's say, if the President himself is unable to make that determination that he is sick, therefore he will not make that declaration as provided for the Constitution. That's one of the ways, di ba? And even if he is able, kaya naman niya, pero ayaw niyang aminin na incapacitated siya. So ang tanong,
Who decides
sino
on his
ngayon
behalf?
ang magde-decide na ang presidente is not capable? He is incapacitated for whatever reason, whether it's health or otherwise. Who makes the decision? Because it seems that the Constitution, the 1935, the 1973, and even to a certain extent, the present Constitution does not really answer that. Although they are saying Section 11 sorts of answers that already, or suggests an answer. So, to legal luminaries, anong interpretasyon nyo diyan? Sino ang magsasabi ngayon na ang Pangulo ay hindi prepared? Hindi
And
na
can
siya
someone
capacitated?
disclose on his behalf?
Exactly.
Well, there is a specific provision nga, di ba, na assuming the President is really incapacitated, ayaw lang niya para manatili siya sa kapangyarihan, the majority of his cabinet members can inform Congress. And that's the process, whether he likes it or not. Parang that duty, that escape clause is given to responsible cabinet members at least majority, balanced by the Congress agreeing to it. And there's a certain process of it. That's very important. Merong ibang escape clause, hindi lang yung... Kasi it's not really sometimes the right to know and the privacy of the president. I think the reason why at times the Supreme Court doesn't want to go into those areas is because it wants to maintain the balance of power.
And the respect for a co-equal branch.
Of course. So I think that's one. The other one, which is also in the deliberation of the Constitutional Commission, we don't want to unnecessarily inconvenience the president. Every time anybody who claims to be the public and says, mukhang may sakit ka, Mr. President, mag-report ka ulit. Walang katapusan yon. And that's why I think binabalanse din yan ng Supreme Court.
That's what Erap did, partner. He actually made a declaration of his being incapacitated and he wrote to Congress.
Kailan yun? Hindi ko na maalala yung partner.
During that time, during our time. And that is why...
Ano yung condition niya?
Sinabi lang he's incapacitated to continue his duties, ergo, I pass it on to the Vice President who will be
this was when
acting
he
President.
stepped down.
Oo.
I have a question, partner. So, merong time na chichismis that President Erap before was drinking, na meron siyang midnight cabinet and that he was drinking every day. Alcoholism, is that a serious health issue? Kasi wala ngang clear standards, no?
If it affects the way you decide and the way you function or govern, then it should be. It should be.
Yeah. Last question ko before we leave this topic. Yung time ba ni President Marcos Sr., there was a time he was very sick. Did someone make a disclosure on his behalf? Iba pa yung Constitution natin that time.
That's why if you read the proceedings of the Constitutional Commission, this provision was to address that.
Correct.
Because at that time, there were claims that he was not the person deciding already in Malacanang. And in any country, that's dangerous because the mandate is given to the elected president. If the wife or the chief of staff, the AFP, or anybody else, any consultant is actually deciding for the president, the republic is in danger.
I have a last lang na comment din. No? So, gusto ko lang sabihin na yung sa Supreme Court decision right now, na binigyan na ng chance to comment ang OSG. No? Ang difference ngayon is they're asking for the president to undergo hair follicle test. Definitely, ako, tingin ko, walang constitutional provision requiring the president, di ba, to undergo tests. So, mahihirapan, I think yun. Pero,
hindi na health yun.
Hindi na health yun.
Allegations of drug
correct.
use.
And the burden of proof is not on him, di ba? Pero procedurally, I think, dapat na pag-uusapan yan. And tama yung ginawa ng Supreme Court to at least allow the Solicitor General to comment before making a decision instead of just dismissing arbitrarily or at the outset, not arbitrarily, but at the outset yung mga petitions sa kagaya nito.
Quickly lang, partner, before we leave this important
Dapat
discussion.
kasi 1-hour episode yata itong by itself.
Gusto ko lang talaga sabihin, not for anything. Hindi ko alam kung bakit talaga question ang health ng ating Pangulo. Kasi not for anything. Nakikita ko siya na umiikot siya sa buong...
Ikaw kasi nakakasama ka, nakapunta ka sa Malacanang.
You could see in the papers, he goes to different places to inaugurate this, inaugurate that, meet here, meet there, all around the country. And then, when I was with him in New York for the United Nations delivery speech, when the Philippines wanted to be part of the Security Council, I saw his schedule. It was, even I will be very tired with that schedule. And I saw it. And then he attended all the meetings, he delivered all the speeches, and he also, I saw him had a dinner, he was eating heartily. It's not a sign of a sick person. So this issue about sickness really, I think there's just this attempt also to try to really meddle the issue on certain matters, make it very divisive or something like that, and to misinform. So once and for all, once it's clear that the president or any public official for that matter is healthy, we just move on.
Yeah. Or like what Attorney Cayosa said, disclose na lang para matapos na.
Correct.
Because it doesn't harm the president.
And I agree with you, Mike. Relatively, comparatively, Attorney Dino had more factual and legal basis in his petition. What did the Supreme Court do? Dismiss it right away. But now, a few years later, another sitting president, iba na ang treatment. But you're correct. It's really highly politicized. So, ang pinakasimple dyan, magbuhat ka ng 10 kilong bigas, mag-jumping jack ka, you show yourself all over the place, that addresses it, regardless of what the Supreme Court will decide. Immaterial na yan.
Or then release some of your good health.
So, it's a political interest, public interest, you address it by yourself. That's the fastest for a responsible
Very
president.
interesting.
Huli ko na sasabihin, kailangan ko talaga sabihin ito. Ang sabi ni Attorney Harry Roque when he was presidential spokesperson, when I asked this, no, the president is 88% healthy. No?
88%.
88% healthy. Parang
That time.
baterya. So, sumulat ako officially. Sabi ko, what is your basis to say the president is 88% healthy? Eh, wala na na-dismiss na Supreme Court. Yun lang yung sagot. Anong bottom line ko? Ang bottom line ko is, hindi nga dapat to political eh. It's something that we should, ang adherence natin is to transparency. The principle of transparency. So, always disclose. Ngayon, si Harry Roque was asking, pwede bang, dapat dinisclose na lang kaysa nagja-jumping jacks. Eh, siya yung spokesperson nung hindi dinisclose eh. No? So, very important, regardless of the personality, let's obey the Constitution. And the principle behind the Constitution, at least based on deliberations, is to err on the side of transparency.
Okay, and be consistent with transparency.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you, attorneys. Up next, from the President's body to the President's books, the SALN. How has it been treated under successive administrations, and what does the Constitution itself require today? You're watching Abogado.
The Philippines is moving fast, and so are we. Billionario News Channel is now live on GSAT Channel 40, reaching a broader audience across Visayas and Mindanao, with brave stories and bold insights that shape business, economy, and the country. From Metro Manila and beyond, Billionario News Channel. In a world where markets shift in seconds, clarity is power. From boardroom decisions to global trends, get in-depth analysis on the forces shaping business today. Explained with authority, context, and insight. Because understanding the story behind the numbers is what sets leaders apart. Business 360 with Apa Ongpin. Weekdays 4 p.m. only on Billionario News Channel.
Alam kong hindi mo pansin.
Honestly, kasi when I recorded pagdating ng panahon nung 25 years ago, I was at that point in my life na ano na siya parang I've already accepted that parang tapos na ako.
Talaga?
Yeah.
Pagdating ng panahon, baka ikaw rin ako.
Welcome back and thanks for joining us. You're still watching Abogado. We now turn to the President's wealth and the document at the center of it. Article 11, Section 17 of the Constitution requires every public officer from the President down to declare the assets, liabilities, and net worth. Republic Act 6713 governs the form and filing of the declaration and designates April 30, which is today, as the national deadline.
Attorney Dino, how should we read Article 11, Section 17 together with the Data Privacy Act and Republic Act 6713? Is the SALN a self-executing public right, or does the Constitution leave room for Congress, the Ombudsman, or the Office of the President, or even the Supreme Court to set reasonable conditions on its release?
Well, nakalagay sa Constitution that has to be an accessible, readily accessible document. That is a constitutional command that is also provided in the Administrative Code of the Philippines. And if you would recall, I also asked as early as 2020 the SALN of President Rodrigo Duterte and Vice President Sara Duterte. No? Again, I was rejected. During that time, right now naglalabasan na yung mga SALN, but during that time, SALNs were actually not accessible to the public. I did a Freedom of Information request. And the denial was based on Memorandum Order number 1 of the Office of the Ombudsman issued by Samuel Martires. Because the first order of Martires, when he assumed the ombudsmanship, or the Office of the Ombudsman, was to prevent people from accessing the SAL and prevent transparency and accountability in government. I always say that point blank, that ombudsman before prevented transparency and accountability in government. I tried to access it. Ang sabi, dun sa Ombudsman Circular number 1 is, kailangan mo ng consent ng tao.
Paano ba?
Paano naging public right yun kung kailangan ko yung consent ng tao? No? So, ginawa ko, okay, sumulat ako sa Presidente ng Pilipinas, sumulat ako kay Sara Duterte, pahingi ako ng consent. Kasi gusto ko makuha yung SALN. Siyempre, hindi ako sinagot. Actually, yung kay Vice President Sara Duterte, may actual denial. So, sinamit ko ulit yun, no? Sa, na hindi ako binigyan ng consent. Of course, before we elevated it, na-withdraw na yung Memorandum Circular number 1. Bottom line is, for me, very clear ang command ng Constitution, very clear ang command ng Administrative Code, and hindi pwedeng mag-apply yung Data Privacy Act, no? Because these individuals are public officials and they're not regular persons. In other words, they are not similarly situated, and there is already a classification made, not just by the Administrative Code, but by the Constitution, that once you're a public official and a public officer, the people should be able to track your wealth so that we can make sure that corruption will be lessened in government. And the main mechanism, again, to lessen corruption is always transparency.
Yes.
Right? And again, sabi nga nung nakarang administrasyon, kung wala namang tinatago, walang dapat itatakot.
Well, thank you so much, Attorney Dino. Now, Attorney Coyosa, are risks of SALN misuse enough to limit a constitutional right, or does restricting access cost more than occasional misuse?
Well, it's not enough. As a matter of fact, when we discuss this SALN matter, we should even go beyond the Constitution and the laws. If we look at this as a global practice, it's a global best practices in democracies, in countries where there is very little corruption. Primarily or to a great extent because they have a very robust SALN law. So kinopya natin yan, hindi naman natin. It's a preventive mechanism. It's to prevent corruption and hold corrupt people accountable. Any restriction to that is really fueling corruption. Ito yung pinakamalaking problema ng bansa natin ngayon Corruption. It's a cancer. It's killing our country. It's so sad that practically all institutions have been restricting it. Number one, and he carries the shame and the blame up to now. Yung unang order ng nakarang ombudsman, that was really terrible. But listen to that. But now we realize Congress did its own thing. Trinistrict din ng Congress. So hindi lang si...
Dapat plenary.
Si
Plenary should
Ombudsman
have
Boying
formed.
Remulla raised that against the Secretary General of the House of
Because for a
Representatives,
while,
right?
they were trying to block his access to SALN.
Even the Supreme Court.
Supreme Court has also done that. So, hindi lang ho yung ombudsman. But yung ombudsman kasi matingkad yun. Kasi he's supposed to be the guardian of accountability and transparency. Siya pa yung numero unong nag-curtail. So, unfortunately, that's the reality right now. So, if we run to one or the other and seek remedy, dapat nasa utak ng mga taong ito, ayaw din nila So, pati din sila dapat, kinakalampag natin because they're also part of the systemic cover-up for corruption, part of the systemic holding back an anti-corruption mechanism.
We'll now open for another round of discussion. And I would like to start off with the remedies because yung sinabi nyo nga, we've had experience with the person who was supposed to be the role model of transparency, the ombudsman, pero in the past administration, siya pa yung nag-block na access to the SALN. But now, we also see, even in this current administration, yung House of Representatives are restricting access to the SALNs, even the Supreme Court. So, what type of remedies are available to citizens? Pwede ba dito ang petition for mandamus?
Yeah. Well, mandamus yung petition at least because nakalagay sa Constitution shall, di ba? Shall na naman, malinaw na command ito ng Constitution, no? Hindi yung shall after the citizen would be able to achieve numerous standards that are impossible to meet, i.e. the consent of the individual.
Yeah.
Napaka-unreasonable yung standard na yun. No? So it's just saddening na
It's a clear duty.
It's a clear duty, di ba? It's a ministerial duty, which is, pagka may ministerial duty, the right remedy is mandamus. Pero sino mag-enforce? Yung Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court has its own policy. So for me, again, the Supreme Court is a human institution, and these are one of the policies of the Supreme Court, which I think is very wrong, very, very wrong. And ang sinasabi nila is baka raw weaponize. Di ba sa akin, di ba yung crystal ball of a potential harm is not enough for you to to actually evade a clear constitutional command and a clear constitutional right under the di ba? Under our 1987 charter. So bakit yung potential harm na hindi ko pa nga makita kung ano yung potential harm? Ano ba yung potential harm? Misuse. Paano may misuse? Ipapakita na hindi nagtutugma yung ari-arian mo? Hindi yung misuse. That is the actual use.
Yeah.
That is the actual use of
Kasi
certain.
kung tama ang declaration mo, it won't be weaponized against you. Kasi paglabas, ay tama pala. Okay,
So I
sorry.
don't understand the argument that it may be misused because that is precisely the use of this mechanism created by law and is commanded by no less than the Constitution.
Very good point.
Yeah.
Well, but the approach should be everybody should be pressured. Kasi kung minsan nagpo-focus lang tayo doon sa akusado, sa high-profile cases, Congress should also be called to task. The Supreme Court should also be asked to review this. Because yung myth na misuse, makidnap, nakawan kami, kung wala kang tinatagong kayamanan, ba't ka kikidnapin? At ikaw pa kikidnap. Ang dami yung Supreme Court, may mga marshals kayo, may mga bodyguards kayong lahat. So, that's a myth. That's a myth. It's very unfortunate na hindi lang ho systemic yung corruption at all level, at all branches. Yung cover-up, yung mga obstacles to anti-corruption, systemic din in all branches of government. And that should be put to the front for the people. Keep on filing the cases, keep on speaking against it, and hold everybody accountable. All the branches of government, because all of them are equally guilty in restricting unnecessarily and unreasonably access to the salad, which is by law, by the Constitution, is a public document.
Yung partner, naisip ko tuloy, pagka gusto maraming paraan, pag ayaw maraming dahilan.
Hindi, iba na daw. Pag gusto maraming paraan, pag ayaw may bilyon-bilyong dahilan. Yun lang ikaw kanina.
Very appropriate. Thank you, attorneys. When we return, closing reflections on our central question, transparency and the presidency. What does the public have a right to know? This is Abogado.
Ilang may gustong sumama, hindi ko pinilit, hindi ko niligawan.
He said it, we heard it. 2 joints. Bugoy na kuy-koy pulls up to Mateo G Primetime.
Can you tell them I'm part of the gang?
No filter, no
Why is
PR,
Puma covering herself? Di pa na-unlock yung character niya.
just chaos. We went through every hustle he's ever done.
Tagalagay ng papel sa scanner. Trabaho talaga to?
Then the wives walked in. You've been warned. Don't say we didn't tell you.
Kisses a fan in the lips. Ay, ano, one-to-one applicant?
Mateo G Primetime, Saturday, 7 p.m. Only on Billionario News Channel. The Philippines is moving fast, and so are we. Billionario News Channel is now live on GSAT Channel 40, reaching a broader audience across Visayas and Mindanao, with brave stories and bold insights that shape business, economy, and the country. From Metro Manila and beyond. Billionario News Channel.
Stay informed when it matters most, from breaking stories and other developments that shape your day. Midday Report delivers clear, concise, and credible news right when you need it.
Join Mai Rodriguez as she brings you the headlines, insights, and updates that keep you ahead.
Monday to Friday, 1 p.m., only here on BNC.
Welcome back. You're still watching Abogado, and what an interesting discussion it was. From health to wealth, from Article 7 to Article 11. Our discussion returns to one enduring constitutional principle: the people's right to information on matters of public concern.
What this right demands of a president, balanced with privacy and security, remains unresolved. We now ask for closing reflections. Attorney De Leon, your final statement.
Well, ultimately, the command of the Constitution is always to trust the sovereign will of the people. Let's remember that the Constitution is a reflection of the sovereign will of the people because we trust the people. And if we trust the people, then we should give them the information, the right information to decide. Ang mga nagsasabi lang na abusuhin itong transparency nito ay yung mga takot sa tao. At hindi dapat tayo matakot sa tao. Alam dapat nila yung mga impormasyon nito kasi in a democracy, we trust them to make these decisions. The moment that you enter public office, you have already waived to a certain extent your right to privacy. You cannot just always brandish this as if it is a magic word that will get you out of every situation. No. If you are not ready to give up a certain amount of your right to privacy, then don't go to public office. Di ba gayahin nyo kami na private citizens? Ayaw namin mag-file lang sa alin eh. Ayaw namin na nakikialam kayo sa health records namin eh. But if you are the President of the Philippines, you are a public official, then the public automatically, in my opinion, and as stated in the Constitution as well, should be able to access your wealth and should be able to access the status of your health. Otherwise, get out of public office if you're not ready.
Very good advice, yeah.
Well, in this day and age where practically everyone, every Filipino sees and believes corruption is really killing our country, 98%. The mechanisms to counter or antidotes to corruption, which is transparency and accountability, should be reinforced rather than diminished. We are very sad to realize that all the institutions of governance that are supposed to counter-check each other are compromised. Nakakalungkot yan. But we have to start with that, realizing and admitting. And the call should be, we continue these discussions. Let's throw away the hypocrisy. One branch checking the other, but everybody, tries to evade responsibility and accountability. What a hypocrisy. So sana, nahatinan, systemic din sana ang approach, and we hold to accountable the Supreme Court, the executive branch, the Congress. Maganda na yung ginawa ng bagong ombudsman. So sana naman, follow the good example for the Supreme Court, Congress, and everybody else. Let the SALNs be out there because they will help us monitor and prevent corruption.
Partner, in Singapore and in other countries, SALNs are actually put online. They're published. Yeah. It is made available for the public to scrutinize. And really, the importance of SALN, as you already eloquently expounded, is also very helpful to really go after those that are involved in plunder, graft, and corruption. And it can put to good use that we discussed this so many times, partner, diba? In our previous episodes, yung forfeiture law. 3719, if I'm not mistaken, Republic Act 3719, which was passed in the 1950s. All you have to do, get the SALN, compare to his lifestyle. If nakita na ang kanyang SALN, ang lifestyle niya, ang layo ng gap, siya ngayon ang magpapatunay sa taong bayan, saka sa husgado, na hindi siya magnanakaw.
Oo, prima facie evidence of ill-gotten wealth. Pag hindi nagmamatch yung wealth mo sa kinikita mo dapat as a public official. Yeah. Thank you so much, Attorney Dino de Leon and Attorney Domingo Cayosa, for walking us through what the Constitution asks of the highest office in the land and what it reserves to the prudence of that office.
The Constitution does not choose between transparency and discretion. It entrusts the presidency with both.
And in a democracy, deciding where one ends and the other begins is a conversation each generation must carry forward. This is Abogado. Good night.